Hey there, Noble County. Today is June 18th, 2020, and we are doing our live stream a bit later in the day than normal. Um, Today was the day to record our June episode of Forage Focus, so I'll look for that to be coming out. It's about celebrating National Forages Week, which is next week. So I've been busy working on that episode today, and for today's weeds that we're going to talk about are all creeping, vining, woody, perennial weeds. And I'm back again at my tree line because, of course, this site of borderline disturbed to undisturbed land is a great spot for a lot of different types of weeds. The weeds that we're going to talk about today, unless you guys have additional comments you want to add, the weeds we'll speak about today are a Virginia creeper, wild grape, poison ivy, and vining honeysuckle. A weed that we actually got a question about yesterday was field bindweed. That is another creeping vining weed. It's also perennial, but it's not woody. That one is herbaceous, and it tends to become a problem in annual crops, and especially those that are tall that it can climb because it is vining. It's in the morning glory family, very similar to morning glory, but more difficult to control. And while I'm not going to talk about field bindweed today, it is one that kind of fits in that category because it's creeping and vining, but it is herbaceous, so it will die back to the root at the end of the year. The four that we have to show you today, including Virginia creeper, which is behind me on this tree, poison ivy on this tree. I do have some grapevine in the woods. I don't know if we'll be able to see it without walking into the woods, which we might do as well. And then also vining honeysuckle. These are all plants that have woody tissue. So of course the green part does die back. It's not an evergreen, but it does have woody stems that cling to upright growing structures like trees, fences, and will spread roots on them to secure itself. And that woody stem is what the plant grows back from, as well as the root tissue. So plants like these are more of a concern in forestry settings than they are in pastures, hayfields, or agronomic crop production. But if you happen to have a forestry management plan, you'll find that those are in there. Poison ivy I don't think is in there because poison ivy is actually a native plant. It's not poisonous to most wildlife. Actually, one of the best ways it spreads is by birds eating its berries and then pooping the seed out across the landscape. But vining honeysuckle sure is, and so is grapevine. This right here is Virginia creeper. I'm going to get a bit closer so that you can see it up close. Oh, look! I think this right here is a grapevine beginning. Right here, this one. But we're going to take a closer look. There's all kinds of stuff in here. Here's our Virginia creeper. Virginia creeper is commonly confused with poison ivy, but poison ivy has how many leaves? 3. Leaves of 3, let it be. Virginia creeper has 5. So that's the easiest way to tell the two apart, but they have very similar growth habits, creeping, vining, woody tissue. You can find them growing on the same plant even, but what you see are these stems that wrap themselves around trunks and fence posts. And it's not actually parasitic. It's not sucking nutrients from the host tree there. It's just a structure that it's climbing on. The place it's pulling nutrients from are the roots that are in the ground. There are some parasitic plants, but of all of these are not parasitic. They're just opportunistic, using the trees to climb on. However, they can cause your stand to be weaker because they can constrict the growth of trees, and then they also compete in the environment for space. So we do want to control them when possible. I've seen lots and lots of Virginia creeper. There's lots of poison ivy. I might go back to that tree I was at before. Here where's where we were yesterday with our goldenrod. Got some really healthy Virginia creeper behind us. In general, the 4 weeds that I'm mentioning today are all fairly responsive to the herbicide Crossbow. They all have a rating of 80% average control, and that's sourced from the OSU Weed Guide, and that's pretty good. If you have all of them and you want to use the same herbicide to treat all of them, that's probably the best one to use is Crossbow. The active ingredients in Crossbow are 2,4-D and triclopyr. But triclopyr on its own is not really effective on honeysuckle or grapevine. So it is pretty effective on poison ivy, but not so much the honeysuckle and the grapevine, which are probably what's going to be in your forestry management plans. But the combination with 2,4-D does yield pretty good control. So if I was to suggest one herbicide to treat all the creeping, vining, woody perennials, it would probably be Crossbow, that triclopyr 2,4-D mix. Here is some vining honeysuckle. There are multiple types of honeysuckle that we have in Ohio. Vining is one, and Tartarian is another, and Bush is another. Tartarian and Bush have a more upright growth habit like a shrub, but vining is the one that causes more issues for us by taking up residence on fence lines and creeping its way through the forest. The thing about honeysuckle is it smells so good. It does have pollinator value, but it is considered an invasive species. So yes, the scent is really pleasant. It does have some value as wildlife forage, and things like sheep and goats will munch on it. But because of its constrictive growth habit, it's not one that we want to keep around. I'm sure that there's someone watching that would love to argue with me about the value of honeysuckle, and that's fine. You can. What we have here actually is two plants. This is autumn olive with vining honeysuckle growing on it. Oh, such a nice library of invasives that we have here. So all of these plants, again, the reason that they're problematic are when they're invasive, so they can really take over an area and colonize it, which takes habitat away from other native beneficial plants that we want, and that they can constrict the growth of our desirable trees. Now I've got a super specimen of poison ivy here behind me. All of these leaves here, leaves of 3, those are poison ivy climbing up the trees. Poison ivy can have extremely thick stems. We'll do a close-up of the root tissue so that you can see that. But those fibrous roots on that thick stem really help it, oh my word, really help it cling to the tree. Look at this. This looks like a poison ivy tree. This is all poison ivy, guys. And my husband is very sensitive to poison ivy. I'm moderately sensitive to poison ivy. So when it comes time to treat poison ivy, he leaves that up to me. And this one is quite impressive. Bethany's calling me. Okay, so issues with poison ivy are that it causes severe skin irritation for most people, and again, that constricting habit. However, it is native and it does have some wildlife value. Sheep and goats will eat poison ivy. It doesn't hurt their insides. I wouldn't suggest it as a forage, but they do eat it. And you can see on this very healthy and massive specimen behind me that it is starting to grow its berries. And I wore my boots and long pants, so I'm stepping in it, but it should be okay. I'm not sure if you can see the berries. I'll flip my camera around so you can see. Oh, can you guys hear Beth? She's upset because the TV isn't working. Our internet has been pretty awful today, so she really wants to watch Woody the Woodpecker, and I can't get the streaming to work. So, do you see those berries, guys? Those little green balls? Those are the berries. Poison ivy will have reddish to white berries, I think. Usually red. I think sometimes white. the combination of the seed spread by birds and probably deer as well is one way that it reproduces. But primarily by those creeping roots and stems that it has, because it can just create such a massive system of green growth that can come from just one stem actually in the soil. And we'll talk about control here in just 1 minute. Bethany? Are you okay? She's trying to whistle for me. That's her whistle noise. What's the one we haven't seen? Grapevine. I had that little tiny seedling of grapevine to show you. Let's see if I can find a bigger one. I'm going to get up here closer to the house so I can see what she needs. There's multiple methods that you can use to treat creeping, vining, woody perennial weeds like these. One is hack and squirt, which is find the central root that's in the soil, cut it, and spray it with a herbicide. For all of these, it's likely you're going to need to use some type of herbicide to actually get control on these. It needs to have a systemic herbicide so it goes down and kills that main root. And I don't want to get too close to the house because my internet will connect to the house internet. What? Yeah, because the internet is not very good today, Beth. I'm sorry. You fixed it? Okay, can you please go? Can you just paint your picture right now? I'm almost done, okay? You can't hear me? She's in her underwear, so I don't really want to put her on camera. Okay, so hack and squirt, right? That was a method, which is you cut off the majority of the plant and try to basically dehydrate and starve it because it's not connected to the root tissue anymore. And then spray that root tissue, the little stem that's sticking up out of the ground, heavily coat that with a herbicide to try to kill the root system. And then the vining parts of the plant that are already there should dry up and die. Beth, what do you need, honey? I can't fix your tablet, baby.
Every tiny part it loads.
I know, hon. It's because the internet's not very good today. I'm sorry. We have a whole host of critters here, and
you fixed it earlier the other day when I was holding that little pipe. You can fix it again.
Yes, I did fix it the other day, but I can't fix it that way today. I don't control the internet. Southeast Ohio needs better internet, y'all. Beth, seriously, can you just hold on for a minute? I'm almost done. Let me try to finish up these herbicide protocol recommendations for you. And I just touched my face. Did you guys see me touch the poison ivy with my hands? I hope that I did not. Whatever at this point. I just wash my whole body with that Fellows Naphtha soap for laundry. They say that's good for poison ivy. I also use Dawn. Let's see. Hack and squirt, like I said. And you can also use a foliar spray. To get good control with a foliar spray, you really, I'm trying to check and make sure I'm still connected to, yes, to Verizon network. You really have to fully coat the whole plant with the herbicide to get it all the way into that leaf tissue. And that's just so difficult because the plant itself is massive and it's just very challenging to get a good foliar application on those plants. So a lot of people will do the hack and squirt method or basil bark treatment. And what basil bark is basically you girdle the stem, you slash the stem open, and you apply the herbicide to that wound so that the herbicide soaks into the wound and goes down to the roots. And the best time to do those treatments is actually in the fall when you're applying to the stem tissue, because nutrients are going down the plant primarily to the roots to save nutrients for winter. So you want that herbicide to go down to the root and kill the root rather than up to the leaves, because it will kill the leaves, but that's not the part that's most concerning. It's the root tissue. So for hack and squirt and basil bark, late fall and even during the winter are good times to do that. But in winter, the challenge is you can't see the leaves, but you certainly can see the roots. Are you able to see this tree behind me and all these roots going up it? That still is, poison ivy. What happened here is we burned a big pile of brush and burnt the crap out of that. And you really shouldn't burn poison ivy because you can inhale the oils, and that can cause a severe allergy reaction as well. So if you are very sensitive to poison ivy, don't use burning as a method of control, because you could have that happen. Those oils, I found some grapevine, I think. Those oils that create the allergic reaction can stay present on the stem tissue and on hard surfaces for like up to a year. So if you are doing hack and squirt method and you're just cutting it and trying to rip it down, you need to clean your tools as well, because that residue stays. Your wheelbarrow, your bucket on your loader, all that stuff can retain those oils that cause the allergic reaction and continue to cause you issues. The most common way that I get poison ivy is by demonstration here, because our pets love to go adventure in the woods and then come back and snuggle with us. And of course, they don't wash those oils off of their fur, and it transfers to us. So very commonly in the summer, I will just be broke out and scabby all over my arms because they itch, and I try not to itch them and take your allergy medicine to make it go away. So for us, poison ivy is a big deal for us to try to keep somewhat controlled, just because of the irritation it causes us. And environmentally, it's not as big of a deal as grapevines and honeysuckle are, but still, all of those plants, they cause issues with taking over habitat, competing for nutrients, and restricting the healthy growth of the trees we want in our forest. Now, I wanted to show you again just an example of the grapevine leaves. I'm going to try not to touch this poison ivy. This is a seedling, okay? So this is the spot that we burned. You can see, we burnt all this spot. And so these are things that are growing back from the ground. This is your grape leaf. So in comparison to what you saw with the honeysuckle and the Virginia creeper and the poison ivy, this is wild grapevine. I have some domestic grapes up by the house as well that I can show you for comparison. But you can pretty well assume if you did not plant the grapes there, it's wild grape. And the fruits of this wild grape, they're not suitable for human consumption, and they're really not that beneficial in the environment of the forest. So it's more of a threat than it is a benefit. All of these 4 that I've spoke of today are that way. So again, the plants themselves are not really considered parasitic because they're not robbing the tree it's growing on of nutrients. That's just the structure it's growing on, but they are invasive, creeping, and very difficult to control because of that massive growth of green tissue leading back to a root that can be very hard to find. But if you're able to find the root, you can cut it off, try to tear down the material that leads to that root, and spray the root with the herbicide to try to get good control. Again, if there's one herbicide that I can recommend for all 4, it would be Crossbow, that Triclopyr 2,4-D combo. Of course, you need to read the label for that to know if it's going to work in your system. It does have some grazing restrictions for lactating animals. Other than that, I think that's the only grazing restriction with it. But it can cause some issues with off-target movement, so you want to be pretty precise with how you apply it. And when you're applying to upright things like trees, you really need to be cognizant of how the vapors are moving, because you don't want that to be on your skin. You don't want to be inhaling it, ingesting it. So, even though it's designed to kill herbaceous material, woody material, not people, it still can cause some issues for you if you're not being careful and following the label on how to use it appropriately. If you have additional questions about how to deal with creeping, vining, woody, perennial weeds, please reach out and contact me. We can speak about your individual situation. Again, if you're enrolled in a forestry management plan, do what's listed in your plan. Once you sign that plan, you're really committing to following through with it. Me, for example, our family, as owners of this woodland, whether we're in a management plan or not, are responsible for controlling invasives on our property so that they don't become invasives on someone else's property. So really, it is up to all of us to try to do our part to minimize the spread of any of these negative things in our environments, including creeping vining weeds, including diseases. So be a good citizen and try to do what you can. Now, I'll show you. These are our domestic grapes. So you can see the leaf shape is the same. These are much larger. We are getting some fruit development. So every year we get black rot, and also the raccoons eat all our grapes. So we've only ever tasted a few grapes because they either rot before we eat them or somebody else eats them before we do. But anyway, it's fun to have. And I can show you, the stem of that wild grape is going to be very similar to what you see here. It can be a very thick stem. So keep that in mind too. When you go to hack and squirt, you may need more, than a machete. You may actually need some pretty intense pruners or a saw or a small chainsaw to get through those vines. They are woody, so be prepared for that. And there's not going to be anything that you can do in 1 year, in one application, to rid your landscape of these plants. If eradication is your goal, you got to set the bar lower, because eradication is not realistic. We want to get to manageable control of these plants. And with that, we'll end the live stream for today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday. It'll be our last day of Weeds Week. We'll cover many more weeds, I'm sure, throughout our live streams. But we'll be back again tomorrow to focus on another one. And tomorrow morning at 8:30, it's Farm Talk Breakfast. So the topic is solar for residential, business, and farm. So these are small-scale solar discussions. Our specialist for energy development is Eric Romick, and he will be our guest speaker. That is a completely free event to attend. I will put the link in the description for the live stream so you can find it there. It's also posted as an event on our Facebook page. So come back for that if the idea of incorporating solar into your farm, business, or home sounds appealing. And so we hope to see you there, and tomorrow again for the live stream. Oh, I see Joyce says goggles may be thoughtful for the root chopping. Yeah, for sure. I don't think that the vapors or the sap is likely to get in your eyes, but anything could happen. It would be more concerning of you touching it and then touching your eyes, touching your face, like I just did. I've done it multiple times. I was touching that material, and then I touched my face. And that's how you can get irritation in your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your ears, those really difficult to deal with areas. So, yeah, goggles is a good idea. Gloves is a good idea. Cover your body as best you can for multiple reasons, whether that's the poison of the plants or the ticks or the mosquitoes or what have you. Poison oak is another one. It's labeled for the same treatments as poison ivy, so if you're struggling with poison oak, you can follow the poison ivy recommendations as well. Okay, and with that, we'll see you guys tomorrow.